the Techstrong gang today.
Hey, Stephen, you mentioned AI and where you're going to run it. I know that in a recent tech field day, Mirantis talked about AI and what's going to be happening there. And I know you know a lot about this. What's going on?
Well, this is an interesting aspect of Tech Field Day is that we get to hear about sort of what the zeitgeist, the vibe of the industry is. And at this point, when it comes to AI infrastructure, the vibe very much reminds me of something I think that you and I could definitely talk about, which is this age-old question of, do you do it on-prem or do you do it in the cloud as a service? And then I guess number two, do you do it in a way that looks like what you've done things in the past, or do you do it in a completely novel way? So as you said, we recently had Mirantis present at our AI infrastructure field day back in September. And a lot of the stuff that they said is really relevant, I think, to the overall question of AI infrastructure choices. Essentially, Mirantis is building an AI platform that leverages a lot of the cloud native abilities and capabilities that they've got in-house in order to basically bring up GPU services for the enterprise. This sounds to me like something that developers would really like. But of course, the question is this what AI is going to look like in the future? I don't really have a crystal ball. How does that resonate with you, Jeff? If companies were to deploy essentially, a friendly Kubernetes-based environment to stand up GPU applications?
Well, first of all, I think it's going to scare a lot of companies off the scale, because when you have it local and it appears to be free, then all of a sudden people are going to feel fewer constraints and saying, here's what I'm going to do, let me try this. So there's that side of it. The I think positive side is you can have more local control, I believe, over what's going to happen and how it's going to be developed, especially in Kubernetes, which ends up showing up like a black box to many. So add all that together, and it still comes down to, I think, the overall basic question of, how do we build things? And is it going to be something we do ourselves? How much of it do we outsource? Do we build or buy? And by the way, that was a question we asked, 30, 40 years ago? And the question still has open answers, because it all depends on how much talent do you have in-house, how much capital can you spend, how much OpEx is going to be there, how many solutions do you want to just buy and plug in versus customize for yourself? What are the costs for maintaining it? I think all of those overlay on top of this as to whether you're in Kubernetes, how many things are going to be local, how many things are going to be in a public cloud. So I haven't answered any question, but I think what I've pointed out is it actually brings up more.
Yeah, well, it really does. And one of the nuances here I want to make sure that it's clear about is that we've heard about a lot of basically hardware-centric infrastructure solutions from companies. Basically the big iron vendors nowadays are coming out there and saying, buy racks of servers with GPUs in them and switches and all that kind of stuff. And software. Well, this is Mirantis we're talking about here. They are definitely not a hardware company. What they're trying to do is actually, I think, kind of bridge the gap between these two pictures here by building essentially what they call a cloud in a box. So the idea would be that this would be truly a cloud, as a service environment, but that it would leverage either on-prem hardware or edge hardware, or even a public cloud hardware. I mean, essentially the idea would be that you could have a public cloud hosted control plane managing your distributed GPU nodes. The idea, I think, is to give people the best of all possible worlds. And there again, Jeff, you've got a lot of experience in the IT industry. It often seems when somebody tries to, basically give you everything, they end up giving you nothing. But on the other hand, I'm not sure that Mirantis is promising everything. I think they're just promising something that meets customers where they are.
So I agree. I think what they're talking about is saying, let's find a way to take what you do and make it more ubiquitous. So take what you do and run it locally. Take what you do and run it on the edge. Take what you do and run it in public cloud. I think on the surface, that sounds like a great opportunity. And I'm not saying it's not a good thing to have. The challenge is you're now creating you're essentially creating one more layer. You called it cloud as a service, which it's not in that standard matrix that you see about cloud services. But you're also saying now what talent and skills do you need in order to make that work? Is this simply plug and play? Is it that simple? And how much trust are you putting in Mirantis if that's the software you're using to do this? So I think it's going to be up to every organization to determine where do they want to be, how do they want to manage it, and what's their AI and cloud combination going to look like. I still think, so I was a physics major, you're still constrained by hardware, no matter where you run it. So I think people need to remember that's still there. At some point, hardware is running what you're doing.
Well, yeah, and that brings to memory the old point of data gravity. Essentially, AI applications require data. That data has not really literal gravity for physics majors, but metaphorical gravity in that you've got to move that data around in order for it to be accessible in reasonable access time, which means that it actually makes sense to either bring the data to the processing for AI applications or bring the processing to the data. But, there's another twist here, too, that I want to think about as well. And that's that up till this point, much of the discussion around AI infrastructure has been focused on training workloads that require just oodles of GPU and memory and data. But that's beginning to shift. I think that we're starting to see companies thinking about, okay, where do we deploy these applications that use these AI models? So I've trained my model, I've got everything up and running. How can I deploy that application in a way that makes sense for the business? And I think that in many cases, that answer is going to have a lot more to do with business questions than with technical ones. In other words, do I want to run it in the cloud? Is this really a cloud application? Do I want to run it on-prem? Do I want to run it on something that's my own cloud or somebody else's cloud? Do I have to share this with partners and things like that? I think a lot of those questions are really going to be business, not technical.
I agree. And it's good that we're having those discussions because the geeks can't run the business. And in many cases, the business may not trust the geeks. So it could be, if you bring it up to that more philosophical, esoteric level, this could be the bridge for those two.
Absolutely, it could. And I think that the idea of having a real software-centric approach instead of a hardware-centric approach, the idea of having something that's very developer-focused, it makes a lot more sense to me than these sort of let me sell you a box with stuff in it and, oh yeah, we'll also throw some software in there kind of approaches. It really resonates with me. Well, I think this has been as good a discussion as we can get at this point. But thanks for your, two gray hairs here talking about the history and how that and what that says for the future of AI accelerated computing.
You've earned it. The spotlight, the responsibility, the weight of teams, companies, and entire industries fall on your shoulders. Lives depend on your decisions, your home life included. At work, you're protected, physically and digitally. Nothing gets through your team without a fight. But in a globally connected world, everyone sees you, including those who mean to cause you and your organization harm. And now home, your sanctuary. Attackers see an opportunity. Your digital front door is wide open. And what compromises your home can breach your boardroom. Because the devil's greatest trick isn't targeting your workplace firewall. It's convincing you that your personal life isn't at risk. Black Cloak. Digital executive protection, defending the new attack surface. Your personal life.
Jeff, I think a lot of people are used to seeing CISOs in the news, talking about cybersecurity instances, talking about all sorts of things, but mostly they're not really treated as executives, as business people, so much as, I guess, Pollyannas, Cassandras, naysayers, whatever you want to say. CISOs just don't get that kind of respect. But we do have a story this week that made international news. And the lead here is not a CISO says something controversial. It's a business executive says something controversial. And then you read the story and you're like, hey, wait, that guy's an InfoSec guy like me. So Jeff, do you like Campbell's soup?
So before I answer that question, and I'm not going to say he's like me, because he and I have a lot of differences, I'd like to think. But in any case, there is a foundational similarity. And I think the good news for CISOs that comes out of the story, and this is a multifaceted story, and I want to talk about a couple other parts of it, are what you mentioned, where the lead's actually buried from a CISO perspective, that Campbell's executives make statements and troubles ensue because of it. And then when you read the story, you realize that executive is the CISO. Well, hooray. Finally, CISOs are called executives. Unfortunately, it's when they do something that makes news that not only gets Campbell in trouble, but gets them fired. So let's talk about the different components of it here. First of all, there's the issue was, and I'm not going to describe the whole thing because it's covered pretty well, but there was a situation where the CISO was having, I think, a lunch with one of the analysts who reported to him, and he made some comments about the ingredients in the soup are being, terrible, they're bioengineered and blah, 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 not worth eating, and it's only for poor people. And then he made a disparaging remark about a certain race of employees that are at Campbell's that he thinks aren't doing any work. I mean, if everything that was on the recording is true, terrible situation. Nothing good came out of that. And now this happened a year ago. It's worth noting. And the analyst then tried reporting this up the chain through Campbell, and the analyst was terminated from employment in January of this year. Now there's a lawsuit from the analyst towards Campbell and the CISO and everything. And that's what made the news. All right, so there's two big things here. First of all, this is a crisis. This is an incident that needs response. Chances are that CISO's organization has something to do with incident response. So you'd think Campbell's would have done something earlier about this rather than waiting until there's a lawsuit. And secondarily, it took this long for it to really come to light. So there's a whole bunch of questions here. But the good news is throughout, CISOs are now executives. Hey, we finally made it. Now let's find a good way to have that happen.
Yeah, I think that you're right that well, at least from my perspective, when I heard about this, I actually didn't notice the CISO angle. What I noticed was, honestly, I just thought the whole thing was kind of funny. Essentially, full disclosure, I buy and eat Campbell's soup. It's soup, soup in a can. It's fine, I'm sure. But I remember reading the story and saying, wait a second, this guy was disparaging some of his employees and coworkers as being, let's say suboptimal intelligence. That's not cool. Also, and the fact that they fired this analyst for trying to report this guy. I guess if I have an angle about this and I'm starting to think about this, I guess let's come right out and say it. I mean, the guy was disparaging Indian coworkers. There are a lot of Indian people in IT. His comments didn't resonate with me. I mean, I maybe I'm just not properly racist, but I didn't understand what that was. But let me tell you, if somebody was saying things like that about a coworker and I wanted to report it up the chain, yeah, I think I'd bring suit against the company if they fired me for reporting that. That's just, this whole thing doesn't smell right,
No, it doesn't. Plus, if you're an executive in a company, you either believe in the product or you don't. So there's one fundamental issue. But also, what we don't know is, the individual, the analyst, went to the lunch with the intent of recording the conversation, which means either they had an agenda, we don't know this, or see, there's a whole lot of things we don't know about this yet, or the CISO has such a history. Maybe the analyst said, hey, it's finally time for this to become known. I don't know what that is. I don't have those facts. I'm not going to make a statement about it. I do think Campbell's could have handled this better. We don't know why he was terminated. It could have been coincidental with the reporting. So, there's a lot of things there. Bottom line, though, Campbell's knew the situation and should have had an incident response plan that, because I've involved those in the past where I've worked, where something like that happens, we immediately invoke the plan and say, here's what we're going to do. Here's 3 possible outcomes. Here's our response to each of those should that happen. So there's all that. I'm with you. I have no reason to believe that the ingredients in any Campbell products, whether they're soup or not, are there's a lot of people who eat a lot of Campbell products, and I haven't read about any widespread issue of health coming from people that eat them. So yeah, I'm with you on that one. Second of all, what's the executive profile really mean for, I don't believe my product? And I'm going to get on Campbell's a bit about this. You can't manage everyone's brain. And by the way, I think you're not properly racist. You should consider training if you want to do that. One would think that if someone reaches an executive level, any VP or higher level, in fact, maybe even director and higher, in any organization, I know I've gone through training that says, here's what our corporate messages are, here's the voice of the company. And it's not that you become a robot about it, but you need to make sure you're in line with that. You're an executive representing the company. And companies with responsibility usually make sure that their executives know what that means. And I think that's something else that might have been missed here. So there's a lot of parts to this.
Yeah, it's a real good point you bring up about the guy coming to a lunch and recording the conversation. There's definitely more to this story than but again, if we kind of look back about what happens in the media, what happens in pop culture, it reminds me of the old lady who spilled hot McDonald's coffee and haha, isn't that crazy? Of course it's hot. There's a lot more to that story than people think. By the way, just look it up on Wikipedia. The whole story's right there. And I think that there's a lot more to this story too. I think that a lot of us sort of got a chuckle out of the fact that somebody at a soup company was saying that their soup is basically trash for poor people. Especially, I think, because a lot of us reading that, we're like, hey, wait a second. I buy that soup. Is he disparaging me? I think that that's kind of what a lot of us were thinking as well. Also, I wouldn't say that it's for poor people. I think that theirs is kind of the name brand, isn't it? Is Ford cars for poor people? I don't know. I think those are cars for normal people. It seems to me, but it usually seems when you read these stories, there's more to the story. And one more thing, Jeff, that I want to point out is often when we do hear about cybersecurity stories, let's set this one aside. When we hear about cybersecurity stories, we hear about breaches, we hear about ransomware, we hear about, threats to the company, insiders, whatever. In many cases, I think that we're probably receiving just as spun a version of that story as we heard about this particular soup story, soup tale, soup stained tie, I guess we could say. Is that your feeling too, that there's a lot more to these stories that we're not thinking?
Absolutely. Let's take 2 of the probably the most publicly out there stories: Joe Sullivan, Tim Brown, from Uber, and Tim Brown from SolarWinds. One ended up getting fired and being convicted. The other was supported by the organization, and I'm not trying to draw that political difference, is still there, went through a lot. Had a lot of health issues just going through the big SolarWinds issue. But he's still there and making it work. And in each of those, the story that you read is the tip of the iceberg. And as we all know, the majority of the iceberg is underwater, unseen, and that's what's behind a lot of these stories. What was the employee's history of the organization? What's the culture of the company? What else went on that resulted in that issue? Because when you see the result, you don't necessarily see everything that caused it. So even with a good root cause analysis. So you're right. It's never simple, but without question, this one has many more facets. I have every reason to believe that now attorneys are fully engaged, and many of those components of the story will not necessarily be known by us.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
So we're recording this episode on Cyber Monday. That's right, the Monday after Thanksgiving. Now, most of us have heard about Black Friday, even though there's a whole, folklore around like what the meaning of that is and what that's all about. Basically, for decades, Americans especially have run out to the stores the day after Thanksgiving to get the greatest deals, doing a lot of shopping. Personally, I avoid stores like the plague on the day after Thanksgiving for that exact reason. And then about a decade or two ago, this thing called Cyber Monday started happening, which is essentially the equivalent when people go back to the office on Monday after Thanksgiving and they sit down at their computers and they say, oh man, Christmas is coming. I better do some shopping. And so all the online businesses start doing Cyber Monday sales. But of course, things have changed in the last few years. Not a lot of people are 100% in the office on Monday morning. Of course, also, not everybody has that kind of a job. I think I should point out that more than 50% of all workers in the US, and probably a lot more globally, don't work 9 to 5 in an office kind of environment anyway. I mean, they never worked that way. And so I guess maybe many of them were probably scratching their heads thinking, why is this a thing? But Jeff, it's Cyber Monday. So let's talk about Cyber Monday. Is it still relevant in 2025?
Well, I think it's relevant for two reasons. One, I'm looking at an article that came from Adobe Analytics saying $14 billion would have been spent on Cyber Monday. Let's see how that turns out. That's a big amount. It's a lot. It's a record. And AI is boosting that. I think this goes back to something we talked about in the earlier segment. Not only is it Cyber Monday and everything you buy online is 20% off if you order and free shipping and everything else you're going to get about it, which is good, if you want to be shopping all that and you plan for it. But now AI can start predicting based on your history of purchases and purchases in your region and the weather to determine what's going to get in front of you right now and what are you most likely to buy. So I think, especially because of AI, Cyber Monday is even more relevant than it has been in the past. And I think it's overtaking Black Friday. One, you have lower risk of physical injury. Plus, you have access to a much broader palette of what you can purchase without having to go anywhere to do it. So relevant, I think, more than ever, in my opinion.
And it's funny. I think that it is absolutely relevant globally. I think that's one of the most interesting things. If you do a little research into Cyber Monday, you find out, I'd hate to break it to you Americans, but Thanksgiving is only an American holiday. They don't have Thanksgiving in other, at least not on this day, in all around the world. But that being said, they have Cyber Monday all over the world. And why? Well, how about because it's generally the first big shopping day before Christmas, it's one of those things where we have to try to get into the Christmas shopping binge. Basically, that happens in December, and this is sort of the kickoff for that. If we look at the all around the world, in most countries that celebrate Christmas, basically December is a big shopping year or a big shopping month, and it happens everywhere. A similar thing, by the way, happens in China when they have sort of the run up to the big holidays that they celebrate there. The same is true in other places with other cultural traditions of giving when they're trying to go out and shop and get things for people. So I think it kind of makes sense, even though this term was only coined apparently in 2005. That's when Cyber Monday first appeared. I imagine that the first week in December was always a big shopping week. Is that your opinion as well?
So, yeah, a couple of things. First of all, I think Black Friday, the term I heard history was that was a day that retailers' books went into the black for the year. And that you can see the mix and match. But the big thing I think about Black Friday is many people in the U.S. had the Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, off, which allowed retailers to say, hey, you're not working, come into the store and buy stuff. So I really think that was a lot of the impetus behind it. And now, if you haven't noticed, in the U.S., Black Friday sales started about a month ago. I started seeing Get Your Black Friday deals now. So now Cyber Monday, even though it's still called Cyber Monday, and no one here is watching this on Monday, it's a day after, you can still get Cyber Monday deals, and you'll be able to do that all week. And chances are, if people don't move what they want, organizations don't move what they want to, you'll have an extended Cyber Monday opportunities, maybe even next week. So this does extend through all of December, and I think it is focused on the consumerism to buy, which, a lot of people need things. It's good to be able to give gifts. There's a whole bunch of good reasons behind it. But without question, Cyber Monday is here to stay. It's going to grow. And who knows, maybe in 10 years, it'll be Cyber Month.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I should point out, too, that according another term I think we should probably mention is Green Monday. So according to e-commerce sellers, the top sales day is not, in fact, the Monday after Thanksgiving, but is, in fact, generally speaking, the Monday that's a little over a week before Christmas, which is basically the last day you can make sure that your stuff is actually going to arrive in time for Christmas. And that's usually their top selling day. So in 2025, by the way, that would be December 8th, which is basically a week from now. That's pretty much the height of online shopping for Christmas. So there's that. But like you said, I saw Cyber Monday deals this week or this year coming in well before Thanksgiving, and I expect that we're going to still see a bunch of online shopping promotions happening here, like you said, throughout the week. Jeff, just for fun here, are there any Cyber Monday deals or basically end of the year online deals, things that you look forward to? I'm sure you got a bunch of renewal notices in your email in the last week. What did you see? What should you call out?
So I am not your consumer advocate reporter here. So I'm not going to pretend to endorse or not endorse any particular products. But for the genre of things I'm looking for, I look for, to me, mainly software. And a lot of people don't say look at that as, but in many cases, software get discounts for a number of reasons. You also need to recognize from a corporate perspective that many vendors' fiscal year ends at the end of December. So that is a good time to try to work a deal, whether you want to call it Cyber Monday or not. But what I look for from a consumer perspective are things that I've been trying to get, whether it's a new microphone or headphones or whatever it's going to be. And I've been waiting because that's probably a little more than I want to spend. I think I can do better. And I look for those. And in some cases, I set up reminders or trackers for it. So I think that's something more and more people are starting to do, to say, what is it I'm looking for? Clothing always works for me. I always buy, whether it's especially shirts, in December, because that's usually when I can find them at a reduced cost, and most likely online, and I don't have to battle the stores and drive somewhere and get in traffic and all that other stuff that everyone hates about the holidays, right? So I think there's a lot of goodness there. I would offer something we need to be aware of that we haven't mentioned yet. I know in the U.S., the FBI has issued a warning about a very popular scam that's out there. It's really not new, but it's a new twist on it, where the bad guys are portraying themselves as either a representative from Amazon or from your bank in particular, saying, hey, here's either a fraudulent activity, or you need to approve this, or we're with the postal service, the delivery service, and you have to log in and approve this before we can deliver it to your home. And that's when you think, oh, this must be a gift from someone else. That is very nice. We need to be aware of that, because now that a large percentage, if not a majority of our purchases are done online, that means all of our transactions are there, and increased opportunity for fraud. The FBI is aware of this. And although I'm not looking forward to the data, I'm looking forward to a report in, say, January that talks about how much was actually lost to cyber scams during the month of December. And I think that's something else we haven't talked about enough, but we all really need to be aware of.
You're absolutely right about that, Jeff. And one of the reasons that I do a lot of Black Friday, Cyber Monday shopping is because they always, a lot of services have discounts on annual plans for things, and I get a reminder in my email saying, "Hey, you got to renew this now because you bought it last year on sale at this time." And my first thought now, when receiving those, is this a scam email? Because like you, I'm in this industry, but I imagine that the first thought for many consumers is, "Ooh, I better click this link." And of course, "I better click this link" is magic words for phishing and scammers. And so I suspect that there's a lot of scams happening this time of year. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Stephen. There are, and I think the easiest way to try to avoid that is, rather than clicking on it, just go to that company's website.
Best advice ever. If you get contacted from your bank, call the number for your bank. No, don't call the number they give you. Call the number on the back of your card. If you get an email from a company, go to their website, the address that you know that it is. Don't go, don't click the link. Unfortunately, sometimes the deals and so on are sent out as links, but you got to be suspicious of those. I guess let's wrap up though. Let's have a little bit of fun here. I will just throw a couple of things out here. I'm a Proton Mail user. Proton Mail every year has a huge Black Friday, Cyber Monday sale. It's still going on. It's going to be going on, I think, till Wednesday or Thursday this week. I recommend Proton, and if you're looking at that, that's a big one. But my favorite crazy Black Friday tradition actually comes from the crazy people over at Cards Against Humanity. Every year, the day after Thanksgiving, they do something absolutely nuts. This year, they had a 99% off sale, not on Cards Against Humanity products, but on all sorts of weird stuff, including a Birkin bag, an actual human skull, a full-size dumpster, a 15th century painting, things like that. So I spent the day after Thanksgiving watching their ridiculous sales, and they really were 99% off. They really did send these things to people. So if you wanted a $29 15th century painting of a rich lady with her face superimposed on John the Baptist, you could have bought one, but only one, for $29 on Friday. Every year they come up with something absolutely crazy, and I'm here for it. I don't actually buy anything, but I'm here for it. I'm here to watch it. How about you? What kind of Cyber Monday, Black Friday craziness have you seen?
So I'm crazy enough throughout the year that I don't need a special day. I think you observed that earlier. In fact, I think that was I think you said I'm a weirdo, and I wear that proudly.
I meant that with love.
Yeah, thank you, and I accepted it as such. By the way, everyone else, all the other Techstrong gang that aren't on this episode, see what you're missing.
Also weirdos, I should point out.
Exactly, yeah, most. But what I look for, the Cards Against Humanity, I think always a good organization, exceptional on Black Friday, certainly. I think any sort of software, especially if it's something you bought in December, always wait until about the second week, because you're probably going to get a really good price on that. As I said, I follow a lot of musicians. I don't wear those shirts when I'm on here, but they all have big sales. Mavericks, John Prine's one of my favorite, always have big sales this week. In fact, I bought 4 John Prine shirts this morning. So, not quite as crazy as Cards Against Humanity, but it's something I always still look for.
Yeah, well, and that's a really good point. A lot of people follow sort of a buy small or don't buy ethos. I definitely support that. Buy local, buy small. buy from individual craftspeople. I mean, that's always really great. Try to give things that support local businesses. Try to do shopping that supports local businesses instead of big chains. And musicians, let's double down on that. I'm also a big music fan. Think about ways that you can give the gift of music. They make most of their money now. I mean, record deals are dead. Spotify has killed sort of everything.
Supreme Court's deciding that this week.
Yeah. And so, buying a t-shirt from a musician is the best way to support them, apart from actually participating in their Kickstarter and sponsoring their album, which is something that I love to do too, because frankly, they're really struggling and they are contributing something that I think all of us can support. So thanks for that reminder that it's not all about, going out and fighting over some crappy TV at Walmart. It's actually better to support local and small and real people.
Absolutely. And go to a live event as well. I know this is turning into something we didn't expect here. I went to a great concert in Austin just last week, Joe Bonamassa. Now, he is not necessarily small and struggling anymore, but he was once. And the way that musicians, artists, performers, all, sculptors, that the way everyone that's made it big, at one point they were struggling and determining whether do I buy beans or pay rent, and you help them get there. So I want to emphasize and support the statement you made.
Man, what an uplifting way to kick off this holiday season. So you heard it here first, folks, from Jeff and from me. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Mike and Alan and the rest of the Techstrong gang would agree here. Support local music, support local artists, support local restaurants and stores, and let's get out there and make a difference this year. Thanks for listening to this special edition of the Techstrong gang. We're a very small gang today, but we'll be back tomorrow with a much bigger gang. I think all the folks are out at Amazon AWS reInvent. There's going to be a lot of news. There's going to be a lot of tech. But for now, go hit the online store of your favorite musician and buy a t-shirt or just make a donation. I know they love it. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to Security Boulevard, the cybersecurity podcast from the Futuring Group. All of our episodes explore a variety of topics within cybersecurity and the technologies that drive it. You can always find us on securityboulevard.com, on the Security Boulevard YouTube channel, Techstrong TV, and every one of your favorite podcast platforms. Before we jump into this episode, let's meet the co-host panel today. It's one of your favorites, starting with Mitch. Mitch, it's good to see you again. You were busy the last couple weeks.
Oh, yes. Flying through the busy skies with not as many traffic controllers as we would like, but we made it home safely.
Absolutely. And then, of course, joining me again is Fernando. Fernando, I know you've been busy for the last couple of weeks.
Oh, God, yes. It's high travel season for conference and events, and I love the interactions. I don't love the logistics usually, but it's nice to be back and chatting with you guys.
Absolutely. And we're very glad to have everyone joining us this week. It is, if you're listening to this, depending on what time, we're recording this week of Thanksgiving in the United States, which means it should be a fairly calm week for everybody, unless something on the internet goes down. Oh, hey, let's talk about that, because that actually happened last week. We joke around about the fact that it seems like the internet is totally dependent on like 3 or 4 services. One of them was Cloudflare. And we noticed that one thing that happened, we got it, I think it was Tuesday of last week. So that would have been the 18th. We started seeing these massive warnings that things were not right. Lots of websites were going offline. There were lots of people that were panicking because they couldn't get to ChatGPT anymore, among all the other things that were going on. And I remember sitting there thinking to myself, I'm like, well, 1, they're going to get it fixed because that's what Cloudflare does. And 2, we're going to get an awesome postmortem when we actually do get that. And one thing I will say that I was very happy to see is that everyone from the CEO down posted on LinkedIn, and they specifically said the words, "We are sorry for breaking the internet." Like that to me was a huge thing of saying we realized that we should do better. But I wanted to jump in. Mitch suggested this episode today. Let's talk about the security implications of what happens when a service as big as Cloudflare kind of gets knocked offline, because a lot of things that we thought shouldn't have broken suddenly weren't available. Mitch, I want to open with you. What was your takeaway from this from a security perspective? Because I have to wonder how many people's security tools suddenly were inoperable and failed open when Cloudflare was not available.
It is a little tough to make sure your offering is secure if you can't get to it, right? Because our security tools often go through the same cloud provider, like a Cloudflare or an Akamai or whoever it might be, for these services. So they're also frequently blind, or maybe there's another path to get to it that you've got to make sure you've got constructed, which brings up what's a plan B when this happens? Because it will happen again, right? There were a couple things about this. One is, I always reflect back onto the CrowdStrike, right? Because that was very much we're going to be transparent. Here's what happened. Here, we'll fall on our sword, but we'll also tell you what we're doing to fix it. And there was a claim of transparency here, at least initially, but it really wasn't that genuine in my estimation, because it was the outage was blamed on a configuration file for their bot management system, which is vital to using the service. We are a customer of Cloudflare. We use it in our infrastructure as well as others, which caused configuration files to grow too big and cause something to crash and not work any longer. And it's those situations where something isn't working, something might crash, etc. It may not be a security incident that causes it, but that also opens up potentially service provider to attack as well when that happens. So you can imagine in a situation like this, it wasn't caused by a cyber attack, but the cyber criminals rushed in to say, all right, how do we exploit this? So it can become a security incident. I don't believe it did, necessarily, but they suspected that some of the symptoms were caused by DDoS attacks that followed on to the core issue, right? Exactly what I'm talking about. So just because it's an outage not caused by cyber doesn't mean it isn't a cyber-related incident. So everything's cyber related, right? Especially when you're a security professional.
But it is, right? I mean, we can debate, for those of us who have been around for long, like there's that debate whether the CIA triad is accurate and whether we needed the Don Parker hexad, right? That had others as well. But availability is a key component of security. It's a key objective for security. So yes, absolutely.
If I can't get the fire trucks to roll because the network's down, that's a security issue, right? I mean, it is.
Well, yeah, the backhoes and the squirrels that take out networks and power grids and whatnot. Sure, it's not cybersecurity as we normally do it, but it is availability. It is related. Like your organization is relying on the availability, the integrity, and the confidentiality of services. And many of us have been around environments that will actually prioritize things like availability over things like confidentiality, right? So the healthcare industry, for example, is known for doctors and nurses and frontline staff. They will have a very how should I say? They'll have a very clear preference for I need to get to this or people die. Right. So cybersecurity teams should keep that in mind as we're designing things for those user communities.
And you bring up a good point there, Fernando. We've become so dependent on a lot of these services as we've migrated them into the cloud that we don't know what happens when things go down. I mean, it's not like we had an incident that happened a couple weeks before that, right? When Amazon deployed a bad DNS update. Oh, wait, we did. And that should be kind of the canary in the coal mine, that no service is completely reliable. Yes, Cloudflare and Amazon and Microsoft and a bunch of the other ones are probably more reliable than most. But even as we saw, Mitch, you brought up another good point. Azure got hit by a giant DDoS attack. And even if services like Cloudflare and Azure and AWS can eat these things, I remember a great presentation that we got at Tech Field Day a few years ago from Thousand Eyes before they got acquired by Cisco. And they were showing a Bank of America DDoS attack. And they said there were 6 DDoS scrubbers that were supposed to eat all this traffic. 5 of them worked. 1 of them didn't. that was the one where everybody was able to get in and DDoS the Bank of America. We've deployed this infrastructure in the hopes that we can prevent these attacks from happening. And to quote the IRA again, all we have to do is get lucky once, and it exposes these kinds of things.
Yeah. So this is one of the areas where I tend to not agree with that. We only have to be lucky once thing. I know what was said, and because we do hear it in cybersecurity all the time. The problem we have is that we have infrastructure that is very complex, that has many moving parts, and we don't seem to have as good of a grasp of the overall picture as perhaps we should, right? And there's a quote I like. It's been attributed to it's been around. I know that Frank Borman, who was one of the commanders on Apollo 8, used it many years ago. And I'm summarizing, but he said something along the lines that the superior pilot utilizes their superior judgment to not put themselves in situations that would require their superior skill, right? So what can organizations do? Apply their superior judgment to how things work so that they don't need to be in situations where they need their superior skills. And where I'm going with this is that I think that this goes back to threat modeling, right? And I think that this goes back to how do we get teams to work together, and how do we get security executives to make it easier for security engineers to have the conversations with application developers, application architects, et cetera, so that these kinds of incidents can be factored into, whether you're using Stride or Pasta or Octave or whatever threat modeling methodology you want to use, so that, yeah, we can plan for these things and we can avoid them. So, anyway,
Fernando,
I'm babbling as usual, but it's...
Fernando, you stole my Frank Borman quote, but thank you. No, I wasn't going to use that. I'm just kidding. But you're right. It's a great quote.
It's a phenomenal quote.
Every one of these incidents points at, one of different kind of factors. It can be an operational, error, things that happen, whether it's a Cloudflare or like the situation with CrowdStrike. Oftentimes it's assumptions too that we make about things that will work and will stand up, but they don't stand up under all conditions, or it can be a security incident as well. I think we're at a moment of, it's time to rethink this. Just like we rethought, do we have bastion hosts? Do we treat things as moats and firewalls and protect things from the outside and just hope, they won't get in? No, today we talk about zero trust and we say, yeah, it's going to happen. Things get in, things will get attacked, things will be compromised, but how do we minimize the blast radius, stop it sooner, those kind of things. And I think when you add complexity to a system, to your point about complexity, Fernando, we don't often address, but what happens when that falls? Because it will fall down, whether it's a database configuration file that generates something for bot management, or it's something else, right? Things fail. Does it have to be hardware or just bugs in software? Processes or edge conditions can be met where we didn't expect that, or we didn't have that issue when traffic was, 2/3 of what it is today. But now at that volume, it constantly is. So, do you build in restart mechanisms? Do you build in failback mechanisms? Do you do things like that? So, and I'm not critiquing the Cloudflare response because I don't know specifically all the things they did or didn't do. This is not about that. But you do have to think about, well, what can we do from a resiliency standpoint? Yeah, we can shift traffic. We can reroute things. Those are great. Those are very comfortable for us. But what about services that fail? About going back to the prior version of a bot configuration, if that is found to be a root cause. And then the secondary aspect is these are like supply chains, right? There's a ripple effect when there's a disruption at some point in the supply chain, in this case, in a very large complex network. Making that change, whether it's a DNS change like for AWS or fixing this bot file issue, it takes a while for it to work its way through the system. Meanwhile, you're battling other fires that cropped up, like a DDoS attack that's taking advantage. So it's kind of fighting a front on multiple fronts on a war. It's not easy to do, but you've got to think about it from a resilience standpoint, and what can the system do to also help keep itself stood up and working.
It's funny you brought up the word war, because the thing that, as we were chatting about the topic for today, one of the things that came up to me first and foremost was that concept that was originally, I think it's been originally attributed to von Clausewitz, which is the fog of war, right? What happens at the moment that stuff happens, right? Some people refer to the left of boom versus right of boom, right? How can organizations be ready for that moment, right? I think that in emergency medicine, I've heard the term golden hour, right? That how that initial, what you do at that beginning, how that has an impact on how things turn out at the end. It may not be an hour, it may be 15 minutes, it may be 2 hours, doesn't matter. But that moment of when stuff happens, how do you go from there? Like, what do you plan for that? And it's a phenomenal topic. Like, we can spend days talking about it.
We could, but I think one of the problems that we run into is, how do you run failure testing on necessary services? Like I know how you do it for emergency medicine or pilots or things like that, because I was talking to one of the people who used to be in my Boy Scout troop, and the way that they do that for pilots is they take you up in an airplane and they start shutting stuff off, and they want to see how you react to that. Oh, hey, the fuel line just got cut to your right engine. What do you do? Oh, hey, the rudder controls are now locked. What do you do? Like, they're looking for basically, how do you go through the checklist, right? And how do you do that on a service that's basically providing things to the whole internet? Well, we know how Netflix did it, right? They created the chaos gremlin. The chaos monkey would go out and it would randomly disable stuff to see if the engineers at Netflix built it properly so that it would actually come back online. That's great if you're a video streaming service that has, a few million customers. What if billions of packets, trillions of packets go through your service a day, and suddenly, you accidentally disable your bot configuration file size checker? And then, like Mitch, to your point, a lot of what happened on the internet was not the initial outage from Cloudflare, because I think they had that fairly quickly resolved within less than an hour. It was the ripple effect that we see through the whole system of, this is offline. Well, it keeps retrying because that service should never be down. And so then it gets knocked offline, which causes other things to go offline. It's the classic problem of traffic, right? A slowdown in one area of a city creates gridlock miles away, because the changes have to flow through the system in order to exit. And I don't know that you can test for that. It's the exception rule problem. What's more likely? My hard drive being the platter going out in it, or someone hitting it with a meteor? Well, I know which one's more likely, and I don't really have a failure scenario for the second one, other than should play the lottery today.
But there's the quotes by Twain that I like, right? It ain't what you don't know that's going to get you. It's what you know that just ain't so. Like, and I probably misquoted it, right? But it's the kind of thing. So I think that all of these downstream, there's two sides here. You're absolutely right about the chaos monkey and what Netflix did with their resilience. Shout out here to Kelly Shortridge and Aaron Reinhardt. They wrote a book about security chaos engineering, right? Which is really interesting. But the thing here is that, to what extent the failures downstream were caused by architectures that assumed Cloudflare is going to be up, or that assumed that this thing is going to work. And those are testable things, right? How do you change? How do you? I'll go back to threat modeling, right? Unless we have a comprehensive architectural view of a system, right? And we come together as security, as architecture, as development, / engineering, right? As lines of business, whatever. And we agree on, this is what this system is supposed to be doing, and here are the failure conditions, and these are the conditions that we're going to choose to accept to these are the conditions that we accept as failures. These are the ones that we cannot have as failures, right? So, okay, perhaps the alternative, and I'm not saying that this was the case here, but perhaps the alternative to an outage with a CDN like Cloudflare is you keep two, and you keep 90% of your traffic on your primary and 10% on a secondary, right? Akamai, Fastly, like so many others, right?
Yeah, let me take another view of it.
Please.
Because this is something I had to challenge my own thinking about, is a known is no longer possible in our world, meaning we don't really know what the network looks like because it's constantly changing. I don't mean the traffic on it. I mean the configuration of it. We have people writing code that are running as edge processes right in our network. I don't control that. That's part of the service that we offer. We may have it sandboxed off. We may not. That's just a simple example. We're making constant changes to the network, right? It may not all be known by any one system or one person that has that entire scope. If you want to project forward, and this is one I bring up constantly, is you add AI into the picture someday that's writing its own code as it works, right? Okay, now you've really got a self-changing system. And maybe to some degree there is, small variations of that today. So I think there's both perspectives, Fernando, is this is what we know, and this is what we're going to protect from or against or respond to, and we'll do our whiteboarding, our red teaming against all of that. And there's the universe of things we don't know, but how are we going to deal with something when it happens? We don't know what that thing will be that will cause it, but a configuration error, an overage on traffic on a certain node, a piece of hardware that decides to start taking its commands from some foreign nation instead of our management system, whatever it might be, right? We have to have some kinds of ways of thinking about resilience for the unknown unknowns. And every one of those will become known, right, as we learn it, not to get too far back into the known and unknowns thing. But I think you have to also think about it as, now that we've assumed that we know what the network looks like and what all its state is, what happens when we don't? Because there will be times when we don't. Maybe that is today or not. So
I can't believe I get to be the first person to bring this up, because all of the answers to your questions are money. I get to say economics before Fernando did, but that's the problem, right? Is that no matter what this issue is, I can solve it if I can just throw enough money at it. Kind of to the point, what if I'm running all my traffic through Cloudflare? Well, 50% of my traffic goes through Cloudflare and 50% goes through Akamai. But Akamai wants 100% of my traffic because they want to charge me for it. And there's always this price battle, right? Of how do I balance this appropriately? I mean, let's be honest. That's the whole reason why multi-cloud exists, is because people want to exploit cloud arbitrage, right? It's cheaper in Azure for the next 45 minutes. So I want to run all my big workloads over there and get, save 38 cents per VM or whatever. The problem is that people get so obsessed with this idea that I can save money by loading everything over here that they forget that there's a cost to that that's not dollar related now, but will be dollar related later. Like, people were attaching billions of dollars to the AWS outage. People were attaching billions of dollars to the Cloudflare outage. And all of the AI providers that we know of, OpenAI, Anthropic, all of them ran on Cloudflare. And so their models were offline for users to get to for that foreseeable whatever. So now they're having to deal with the fallout of that, angry customers that couldn't write term papers or whatever it is. But more importantly, how do they fix that in the future? Do they demand more of their providers? Do they write more stringent SLAs to say, I need this to operate at a better thing? Worse yet, Mitch, you kind of alluded to this at the beginning. What happens if there's a breach during that time when my security systems are offline? Is it my fault because I did everything that I could? Or is it your fault? And can I get money out of you for it's your fault? Either you or my insurance company.
So let me, sorry, Fernando, and then I'll back off here. So even that, Tom, assuming that I can solve it with money, actually you can't solve it with money. There's no infinite amount of money that would solve it. Part of the reason is because the way I think things are today is not going to stay the same. So I'm going to push half of my traffic, or a third of it here and a third of it there and a third of it over there. Tomorrow, some business deal gets struck that changes that, right? That I don't have any control over that. Akamai buys some company we didn't expect but that's who we were pushing traffic to or buying a service from as a backup to. So that system doesn't stay static and change. And now we have to adapt to it. We didn't know what to expect that, but we can't count on that being the way it is at the point in time we hit the save button on the plan.
So this is where I go back to, we are evolving as an industry, right? And I think that, Tom, thank you for bringing the economics first, right? That's lovely. But I think that this is, one of the major trends we're following at Futurum is this broader evolution of the market, much more strategic and so on. And I point you, and we see people, for example, our cybersecurity decision maker has people indicate a clear preference for platforms over point products, for example, right? Doesn't mean that it's complete, it's never going to be one, etc. But people do have that preference. But this is where I look to other industries for inspiration. If you go look at major airlines, right? Major airlines don't run their entire fleet on a single provider, right? You have Boeing and Airbus. Now, those two major aircraft platforms have emerged, but airlines choose to run both, right? So airlines are taking the cost of, hey, it would be much easier to have all my mechanics, all my maintenance, everybody, all my pilots just certified on one type of airframe. But no, we're paying them to have, we'll have the cost of doing both, right? I think technology is the same, right? We are going down that path.
I'm going to put a little pin in that, Fernando.
Please.
Most major airlines are running both because of supply chain issues. I fly Southwest. They fly one plane, the Boeing 737. Now it's the 7, the 8, the 8 MAX, whatever. And they have so far used that to their advantage where it has been low cost because they only have one set of mechanics. And if something happens, they can just swap a plane out. But when they go down hard because like when the MAX 8s were grounded, that really snarled up everything, right? And I think that you're rolling the dice there. You are hoping that the amount of money that you're saving now translates into enough of a war chest that if something does go wrong down the road, you have money to fall back on. Except we know that's not what's happening because the savings that you're making are actually either getting plowed back into stock buybacks or other things where that money is being sucked up. And I think that what we have to do is get back to a scenario like we've seen in cybersecurity for years where the rules say that you have to have circuit diversity, that you have to have service diversity, that it is built into the system that you can't monkey with things, like you said, Mitch, that, better deal came along. Well, I'm going to swap to it for the next 30 days. To me, that reminds me of the people who will sign up for a service like home internet, and every 30 days they'll call and cancel it to get a better deal, through the retention department. Well, eventually that's going to run out, and then you're stuck holding the bag. So is the answer that we just have to mandate from a security perspective that you must include this in your planning and don't just hope for a rainy day?
Well, I'm way woefully behind on my quotes. I made a note. I've got to make.
I love
really bone up on my quotes. So I'm going to share one, teeing off of what you said about looking at other industry. Alan Kay, who is an Apple fellow, he actually worked on at Xerox PARC and came up with the idea of the Dynabook, which is the precursor to the laptop. He has a great saying. I don't know who discovered water, but it wasn't a fish. So you've got to look outside of your system, right, to bring in new thinking, fresh thinking, whether it's, and I had one of those moments too, Fernando, earlier in my career. I was doing due diligence on an airline reservation system. I was a DBA, right? That was my job at the time. I walked into the data center, red lines flying across the main console. Every one of them said database pointer error, and nobody was doing anything. Nobody was like, there's no panic. There's no what? They're all just kind of sitting there doing it. I'm just like, what the F is going on, folks? This is like, is somebody fixing this? And like, no, you don't understand. And this is such a high capacity system. We accept a certain amount of errors in the system to be able to handle the volume. So that's okay if there's database errors. When the person at the desk hits enter and says, I need to, the system's being squirrely today. they're doing the transaction again because the first one failed due to a database error, but we make it up in volume. That was a mind-blowing, I thought everything had to balance at night, but I guess not in the banking industry, but for airlines, it's different.
And this is super interesting because it ties to, I think there's a psychological phenomenon called the normalization of deviance, right? Which is the idea that you get used to these kind of errors. And then at some point, it is an actual error. Oh, look, 49 times we've had this ACL failure, not ACL, but whatever. The 50th time it's there, right? And I think that this is goes back to that preparation that teams should be doing, right? How do you prepare for, how do you keep your teams sharp to be able to address those kinds of things, right? Anyway, I think it's an important point.
In layman's terms, I call that it's all good till it's not.
Yeah.
The common term I hear a lot is alert fatigue, right? Oh, that thing's red and it's red. It's always been red. Well, what happens when it's not red? What happens when something goes it goes off or whatever? And a way that a lot of security companies are actually solving this problem is, we had to say it, they're using AI. They're providing context. Why, Mitch, to your point, yes, a certain number of transaction failures are acceptable, but what happens when you go outside of that? When is the threshold for this is now a significant amount of transaction failure? Which I think is ultimately what needs to happen here. We need to be able to provide context around these things for people to really understand what's going on. If we don't, then we're just going to get numb to it, right? It's like, oh yeah, things are just acting squirrely today. Well, what's the difference between squirrely DNS resolution issues and massive outage? It's about 20 minutes of Amazon engineers going, I don't know what's going on. And that's where we're going to get to as more and more of our systems become dependent upon these things. I've completely gotten rid of all DNS resolution on site, and now I use, pick your favorite public resolver platform. I don't store things on my local storage anymore. I store them all in the cloud. Well, that's great until S3 has a hiccup. We've got to understand that if we're willing to trade these things for lower costs, we have to be willing to accept the fact that we no longer control them. And I don't know how to write that into a security plan.
But you know what? That's fine. I think that there are things that we as organizations we should have enough of a view of what can go wrong, and then we pick our poison. We are okay with this. Southwest is perfectly fine in the value that they provide, given the business strategy that they have chosen, right? Air Canada or United, similarly, they need the extra fleets, right? And it's you brought up regulation, right? I think this is the area where we need this evolution of secure by default, right? We need this evolution of secure by demand, right? How are we improving the current status of things so that, yes, these things are more resilient? They are going to cost more. Are you willing to do that or not? Right? It's economics. It's always economics. Sorry. Right? And but this is the scenario where we are. This is the evolution that we are doing. So if I have to leave people with one piece of advice, is work on your threat modeling for something. Have that conversation with your teams to know, look, what happens if this goes down? Oh, listen, we don't care about that. That's fine. You know what? You made a decision. You live with the consequences. Oh, no. That's super important. Okay. This is what it's going to cost you. You okay with that? That's the conversation that we should be having.
I think part of that threat modeling, Fernando, is extending it to applying this. We'll accept a certain amount, but when it does happen, wherever it happens, our security response isn't necessarily to the config file issue. It's hey, I got a config file issue over here in Australia. All right. Level 2 on our, resilience around security, because we know there's going to be attacks kicked off from that. And that potentially could be a threat, but we also could be DDoSed. We could be da-da-da-da. So your response plan on security isn't by initial security threat. It's as a consequence of another problem. We now have security issues, right? Escalating.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes, and to end with, I think it was Jefferson, right? The price of freedom is eternal vigilance, or something like that. Was it Jefferson? I don't remember. Right.
Or Franklin, Benjamin Franklin. We have
Okay.
a republic if we can keep it. So there you go. I'm keeping up with you. I'm trying. I'm doing my best, Fernando.
So everyone out there in our listening audience has homework. I need you to go to WikiQuote. I need you to confirm all of these. But more importantly, I need you to find an appropriate quote and leave it in the comments for this video because I want to hear what you guys have to say. That's just going to about do it for this episode of the Security Boulevard podcast. I want to thank everybody for tuning in this week. We've got a lot of things going on over at futureandgroup.com. There's some great reporting that's coming out. I know there's going to be some great articles coming out because we've got one more big show of the year, AWS reInvent. And then we're kind of getting into that quiet period in December where we're gearing up for more stuff going on in January. So make sure you're paying attention to all of our properties, securityboulevard.com, techfieldday.com, futureandgroup.com, to find out more information about that. If you enjoyed this conversation, do us a favor, subscribe on YouTube or in your favorite podcast application of choice. That way you don't miss any of our episodes. We'd love it if you'd leave a comment, maybe a rating on a podcast app and a review. That really helps us grow the show to new audiences. Don't forget that this is brought to you by securityboulevard.com and the Future and Group. If you want to check out all of our show notes and all the other stuff related to the podcast, make sure you head over to securityboulevard.com. You can also find us on the Techstrong TV website or in the Techstrong TV app. It is the best way to put on the TV, and instead of listening to one of those boring, crackling Yule log fires over the holidays, you can listen to Fernando talk economics and Mitch disagree with some of the things that he says. Make sure you're following us on Security Boulevard on X and Twitter, or on LinkedIn. Look for Security Boulevard. That's Security BLVD, because we don't believe in vowels around here. And we want to thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you after the big turkey day.
Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel.
And Mitch Ashley.
And you're listening to Still Cyber.
Still Cyber? Still Cyber after all these years?
After all these years.
Oh my God.
A little
crazy.
play. Mitchell and I started doing our first security podcast, was called Still Secure, after all these years, because we didn't have cyber then. But you know what? This is a remake, kind of. It's all the rage in Hollywood, Mitch.
Reboot. It's a
reboot. But also, you know what? Cyber's cool. And we both do a lot of podcasting, Mitch, and videos, but it's good to talk security a little bit. So we're going to be doing this. I can't promise you it's going to be the Tuesday of every week, but Mitchell and I are going to try our best to make sure we do it regularly. Mitch, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, very timely here. It's the week of AWS, but we want to talk about this letter that came from companies like Cisco, CrowdStrike. A number of companies wrote Congress, wrote the president, really the White House, and said, hey, you're back. Congress is back. Mitch's words, get your butt back in gear on cyber here. We've fallen behind during this whole shutdown. And actually, the Democrats, I think it was, wrote to Kristi Noem and said, you need to get CISA back together, rehire these people. Industry is concerned that we've taken our eye not only off the ball, but took our hands off the wheel for however many days this happened.
Well, to be fair, I don't think it was just the shutdown, Mitch. I think that this and I don't want to get into a Republican-Democrat thing, in all honesty, but I think it's fair to say that this administration has, whether it was because of Doge or Dodge, whatever they called it, or whatever, they have depreciated the cyber function in government at a time when we should have been investing more in it. We really cut it down, and here's my reason for it. Look, I always considered myself a centrist. I'm not on the far right or the far left, but I think that there are certain functions that the government, you need government involvement. Defense is obviously a big one. But then big projects like going to the moon, right? Would we never have gone to the moon had it not been a government program? I think cyber has become one of those projects, Mitch, where it's too big for any one company, any one industry, any one vertical. It's actually too big for the government alone, too. I think optimally we need a government, business, people partnership for us to have any hope of standing up to an increased, attack surface.
When you talk about nation state, well, let's go back a few years. Homeland Security, right? That was formed because of 9/11.
Yes.
Getting the different agencies working together, communicating, more free flow of information, which is a lot of what SUSE has been about, which I believe was tucked under Homeland Security, under Kristi Noem. And, that's about also, not only in the government, but also with the public sector, public-private sector, communicating, working together. The FBI efforts that we've had over the years, those things I think have been helpful. But suddenly we're swung the pendulum toward, well, let's have private do it. Okay, you might believe that's
well,
the better
we're going to leave
philosophy,
private on their own
but-
to do it.
Yeah, but in the meantime, you could have vacuumed by wiping everything out.
It's too big for just a private. You mentioned SUSE. It's not just SUSE, to be fair. It's MITRE, it's NIST, there were they're kind of quasi-governmental agencies that are involved there. But but let's get to the nitty-gritty, Mitch, right? Because we're trying to keep these to 20, 25 minutes. We're faced with a situation right now where the bad guys, whether they be nation states, financial, hacktivists, extremists, whatever, they're using AI.
Oh, absolutely.
And they've upped their game. Whether it's using AI to write malware, to write better phishing, to just be more evil.
Or even accelerate the velocity at which they're doing
Absolutely.
not just attacks, but new.
The velocity and the quantity. It's like an exponential, x2. And at that very moment is not the time to start breaking down the fundamental infrastructure that we've built up that, look, has been responsible for things like SBOMs, right? I don't know if I'm friends with Alan Friedman on Facebook, so
I've been a podcast with him. And
yeah, Alan kind of is the father of SBOMs, but it's not just he who left SUSE. Basically, that whole SBOM team is gone. That's one instance of it. It's the stuff around the CVE database and what we're doing there. But
which is the MITRE part, yeah.
Yeah, and again, MITRE's a quasi-governmental thing, but they need support from the government. Mitch, there comes a point where you have to have the political will. And I give credit to the EU. You could say what you want about the EU, Mitchell. Do you agree, disagree with the rules and regulations they're promulgating? I don't agree with all of them. But at least they have the political will to do it. Right now, I feel we are paralysis by analysis and a lack of will to say we're going to do something.
I feel like we're adrift.
Yeah,
Like
we are.
We don't not only have enough direction, we have a steering wheel.
Yeah.
What direction to take.
I was talking, my days, Mitch. My days often start with my first interview being about 8:30, 9 o'clock Eastern time with an Israeli cyber company. Take your pick. There's only 1,000 of them. But,
New every day.
Yeah, there's a new one every day. I think they wait outside of 8,200 and just sign them as they hand in their
Next.
retirement papers. Come on in. But anyway, I was talking to CEO of a company that recently came out of stealth, out of Israel's cyber scene. And he was talking about the attack surface that AI brings to this and threat intel, right? Because if you don't think the bad guys are using AI for, in essence, their version of threat intel, reconnaissance. And if you are a company out there and you're not using this, I honestly don't know I don't know how you can not be a victim at this point. It's, the stakes have come up. We need a public-private partnership to do this.
Well, what do you think it is? I mean, I see. Okay, so the private sector sends letters and we want you to do more. We want you to bring this back. The Congress, whichever side you pick, decides they don't like something, they write an agency. We need to do this. We need to do this better. It seems to me it's a leadership gap, not just a we need to do more gap. Somebody has to step up and say, not saying it has to be the president or it has to be the head of, somebody has to take that mantle and say, we need to do the following things. Let's build a coalition of public, private,
Of the willing.
non-political, whatever it is. It's actually better if it's done that way.
Oh,
'Cause
absolutely.
then it just doesn't become some big, governmental overhead thing or some for-profit only, but kind of leaves out other things.
Well, just between you and I, Mitch.
Yeah,
Nobody's
nobody's
watching.
listening yet.
Right.
This is a reboot. So.
Most of the leadership has left
Hmm.
the building, right? The last person turned out the lights. And so anyone who has the industry knowledge, the technical know-how has probably recalled in horror. But it comes down to political will and priorities. When you're in and I'm not mentioning names, but about 2 months ago, I interviewed a fellow, I think his last name was Bellini. I am mentioning names. And this fellow and his brother, I interviewed them both. They sold a company for a couple $2 billion. And like every university, at the University of South Florida, there's the Bellini School of Cyber and AI.
Interesting.
And if it's not Bellini, it's something that sounds like Bellini. I apologize. And he has set up a whole fund to set up like an incubator for cyber companies, basically in the Tampa area.
I love that.
US.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
I brought this up to him because here's a guy. He actually, and again, I don't care whether you're Republican or Democrat, but he's actually in good with the administration. He writes big checks.
All the better,
I asked him about this, Mitch, and you know what he told me? He said, well, CISA had a pretty big budget. Well, I don't know if we were getting bang for the buck with that budget. Maybe there's better ways of spending that money that'll give us. Now, I questioned him further on it. His thought is the companies he's investing in his incubator could provide that service. Why do I want the government to do it? And to your point earlier, that's that.
It's a whole philosophy, right?
Right. Let the private sector do it. But you and I have been in security a long time. Some startup coming out of 8200 in Israel or the University of South Florida, they're not going to solve these big issues that we need.
Nope. And today's darling startup company is tomorrow's acquisition, which tomorrow's may or may not fail in its, integration into a
broken
bigger
omelets.
company. Yeah,
broken eggs in
So
the
it could be
omelet.
gone tomorrow. We could be left holding the bag again.
But you know what, Mitch? We're out here at AWS reInvent. Security is on, it's not a back room thing. It's front and center, certainly.
Well, let me throw this out to you. I think something the government could do is create an environment for innovations, fund tax benefits, helping entrepreneurs invest in companies. Great. Let's.
Do they
have
get
that.
to own a piece of the action?
Well,
That's the model
there's some
these days.
some that are doing that. I wasn't going to suggest that, but that could be part of the game or is part of the game. Whether I don't agree with it, but my point being, it doesn't have to be a government agency that's running it, and it's all inside the government.
No.
It doesn't have to be current government partnering with current companies. It can be us as taxpayers helping invest in what entrepreneurs don't want to do, which is great companies and great technology.
So again, I'll keep my central truths
Am I
here.
tilting at windmills here?
No, you're not tilting at windmills, Mitch. But I was a poli-sci, political science.
I
major, right?
remember.
So what's
that
the
good
role of
Catholic
the,
school upbringing?
Yeah, good.
St. John's.
Yeah, St. Vincent de Paul, pray for us. But anyway, what's the role of government here? I don't even need the government investing in these companies. You know what? There's plenty of venture capital.
There's a lot of money. Yeah.
I think the role of government here is to set priorities and policies and direction.
Well, that's the leadership.
That's the role of
I agree with
government.
that.
And if they would set up, we used to, back in the day, remember what the governments, when we had governments that actually worked, what was always the government's response to anything that happened? We're going to set up a blue ribbon panel.
Oh, yeah.
Right? We're going to have a blue ribbon panel of
years later.
Yeah, the best and the brightest. But
the report comes out.
Well, if you're lucky, it was only that thick. But you know what, Mitch? All kidding aside, those blue ribbon panels often did bring together the best and the brightest in private and public. And because here's another place that I think we're lacking in. Our university system is the envy. I think it still is, but it certainly was the envy of the world. Innovation can come out of our university labs as well, which are government and private funded. However, our university systems and labs and all this are also under fire under this current kind of way of looking at it from government's role in all of this. And when you're cutting funds and cutting students who are the lifeblood of a lot of these programs, again, you're chopping them off you're kneecapping them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's a third stool for this, or a third leg of this stool, right? There's private, government, and educational, university kind of resources. We need, Mitch, here's the thing though. The building's burning down. We need those first responders. We need the fire department. We need to be doing something. Here's another thing though, I realize we're running low on time, but what do you think about this? The idea of go hire those people back. You think they're going to go back?
There might be a few who really are, they're into being into those kind of jobs, and maybe some work that you can only do that way. I could see some people going back.
Policy wonks.
Yes. And people who are just, I want to be in a service kind of role type job, and, God bless them for doing that. So a lot of folks have, maybe broken out, hopefully gotten jobs and making a lot more money and said, this ain't bad either. Maybe it's better. I'm probably not going to go back to doing what I was doing.
And that's my point, is you can't turn back the clock and put the genie back in the bottle. I think, these are bold new times with bold new times with new threats, and we need bold new ideas and bold new people to handle this. We don't need to set up the Peace Corps. But we need, you know what I mean? We need that kind of movement.
We do have to rethink security, right? In many ways. It's a different time than firewalls and load balancers and XDR or whatever the latest thing is.
There are still plenty of lands out there that need those. It's funny, I was talking to someone, I was at an event in Brooklyn at that AI native dev conference.
You had a lot of good things to say about that.
A lot of good stuff. And I was talking to someone there who actually started with NetScreen. Remember NetScreen firewalls that Juniper bought? What was it? The Yee brothers who then started Fortinet. Look, there was a lot of hay made around firewalls and that. It
was a big deal.
Moat and Castle. But you're right. That's not tomorrow's cyber solutions. I'm a firm believer that tomorrow's cyber solutions, you need AI to fight AI. They've got to be AI empowered.
Well, the kind of the good and bad of it is we don't have those things in place. We're introducing a whole new agent fabric and AI data fabrics and all kinds of stuff, of which, let's not make the same mistakes we've made before. How do we build security into this? And industry is responding. It's happened slowly. Some good open standards have happened, and they're adding more security into MCP and A2A and things like that. But also, like we're at reInvent this week, they're announcing, an AWS security agent.
Yes.
They're also introducing more implementation of security policies as part of the agent fabric or agent control plane. if you will. Other companies are doing that. It's not that it isn't getting addressed. Is it the right set of things? And are we nibbling at the edges? Are we really solving the next architectural challenges around AI? I think that's the issue.
And can I be perfectly honest?
Let's be honest. Joan Rivers.
Yeah. Can we talk? Look, at this stage of the game, from what I hear in people and what I see, most AI agents suck. They just don't work yet.
It's early.
It's early. Okay.
It's early.
It's early.
See, I'm going to give you the Midwest.
Yeah, that's
nice.
Nice. You know, it's funny. I got off the plane in Vegas today, and I think it was Databricks. All the companies have neon.
Oh yeah, they're all data
signage.
Data, yeah, exactly.
But Databricks had one that says, "Finally, an AI agent that doesn't suck." I give them credit for whoever did that at Databricks was probably AI who came up with it, but it was it was a true thing. I think we're seeing it as at Salesforce, right? Benioff and them put a lot of money into this agent force. I don't know if it's caught people's fancy yet.
Well, there's that view of it. There's also, we'll see if it turns. I think 2026, we'll see. It's either going to be real or not. I mean, can we go another year of, it's Linux on the desktop. It isn't quite ready yet. This could be the year of agents get real. I think it's got to be proven some value. And there are some studies that are showing that people are seeing good things from it. So it's not all,
No, it's not all the MIT study.
No.
But, but I'm looking forward, Mitch, in a few months now, 3 months from now or so, a little more, we'll be in RSA conference in San Francisco, and I think we'll get a chance to see sort of state of the state, if you will, of the security industry. I think it is going to be a lot of AI, agentic AI, especially.
Yeah.
And we'll see how well they're catching on. I think another area that I'm heartened to see is an increased emphasis on risk and risk management and risk operations.
A holistic view. And
yeah. Again, something that the government could help with. Bringing it back. Anyway, Mitch, we probably did our 20, 25 minutes here. Just for people who stayed on this long, though, what's your take on reInvent this week as it relates to security?
It's the beginning of it. So we're taping this at the beginning on Monday of the event. It really kind of starts tomorrow. So it's still
that's why you're an analyst. You're supposed to.
But I can tell you all what's going to happen.
That's what
I do predict the future.
That's right.
No farther than 2 days in advance of the conference, because that's all the preview.
That's the only previews you got. Okay.
Yeah. No, we're going to hear a lot about frontier agents, which basically are longer running, maybe even multi-day running, handling much more complex, multiple models, higher kind of in DevOps, in operations, in security as well. So in a way it's good. It's also now we're sort of whitewashing the frontier name, because frontier meant in models really kind of bleeding edge. Here, maybe that's the newest thing. I'm not sure if it's bleeding edge as much as it is how do you use models in a practical way. And some things around being able to control what the outcomes are. So here's the boundaries, not just for security, that's part of it, but also what are the expected results coming out of an agent? So you can say, that's off base. How do we curve that back in to try to get more accurate, higher responses, accurate response rates from that. We're going to hear about building your own models, but rather than taking the open source, open weighted models, being able to use some of Amazon's models and using your own data, essentially creating your own trained models, using theirs as the base. So you hear a lot about that. There's kind of a lot of pieces around supporting that. I think that those are the two big things that I've seen so far, I would say.
Yeah.
Now, are they really super big things? I mean, there's,
it's evolutionary, not revolutionary.
And we're in this period of, this isn't the marathon. This is we're at the quarter mile, we're at the 1 mile mark, we're at the 2 mile mark.
Well, it's like the Kentucky Derby, and you want to be coming down the stretch.
Right.
But I do think you got to remember, this is a long-term game. Long-term game. And it's also the Amazon way, right? Amazon give you 80% of the functionality.
Yep. and about 800 announcements when it comes out at reInvent, which is always loaded with.
Absolutely.
Hey, by the way, if people want to reach out to him, why don't we have them email us at stillcyber@techstronggroup.com.
That'll work. Still Cyber, STILLCYBER. We'd love to hear what you want to talk about. And if you're one of my and Mitch's cyber friends, security friends out there, we know who you are.
We know where you live.
If you want to be on the show, we're looking for guests. Okay.
And if you're a company, you want to sponsor some episodes and come on, we're happy to
do that too.
So talk shop with you. But this is what you get. So that's what you're paying for.
Still Cyber after all these years. Hey Mitch, it's good to be on here.
Good to be back.
Hey man, it's been, wow, I don't even want to say how long it's been. Enjoy the rest of our Techstrong TV for this whole week. We're going to be broadcasting live, streaming live, and well, maybe Mitch, maybe we will try to do a wrap-up Thursday.
That'd be good. Oh yeah, we could totally do that. That'd be fantastic.
All right, until then though, this is Alan and Mitch for
Still Cyber after all these years.
Wow. We're out.